This is from 2020, and the University of Manchester looked at all global alcoholic beverage industry and how much greenhouse gas it produced overall. And it was about 1.5 gigatons of greenhouse gas. Basically, the output of 276 million cars a year. That's pretty crazy. Maybe explain what are the most impactful things in the entire process to actually make something.
Yeah, sustainability. I have my own kind of thoughts about how to make our own process sustainable. But when we were talking about diving into this a little more about the CO2 emissions and greenhouse and gas emissions, I dove into it a little more, and it really intrigued me. It's crazy to think about 276 million cars. I mean, that's like, what's the scale of that? 2021, that's the total cars registered in the United States. It's like that's how many cars there were, and that's a massive scale, right? But looking at that, I was like, well, what are the main contributors, right? And I did not think the distillation, the actual process of fermentation distillation, was going to be the biggest factor. I thought first off it would be freight, it's going to be shipping, it's going to be all the issues. We're getting glass from China, we're bringing grain from the Midwest, or if it's for us, we bring grain from California, so we're kind of limiting that freight. I mean, you think about worldwide production or U.S. production of spirits. I mean, it's stuff traveling from everywhere, right? Boxes, glass, ingredients. So I thought that was going to be a big part of it. But distillation it does take a lot of energy to bring a liquid up to a vapor, hold that at a vapor for 8 to 10 hours on your run, and then you're taking a lot of energy to cool that as well. These steam boilers, you got electricity that you're pulling off of. So you think about the byproduct and all that power that it takes. I mean, that's about 40% of the contributing factor to those greenhouse effects.
Just the distillation, right? This 40%.
Just the distillation.
Yeah, so that's the biggest part. Yeah.
And
then the transportation.
Yeah,
and the transportation is only 7%. That's what you're showing here. And I see that a lot of other industries as well. I think a lot intuitively, until I really got into this space more, I thought a lot about airplanes and cars. That's actually not where a lot of pollution comes from. It's usually, other ththings in the process that really drive that up.
Yeah. And I think it's like just the perception of consumers, right? Yeah, they don't, even mine, like just off when you first asked me, without research, I was thinking, okay, transportation for sure, because that's what's available for me to see. I see trucks and cars, and but you don't think about what's behind the scenes of, growing the grains, like, all of that. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy.
The other stat you put on here, which I thought was interesting, is 1 in 3 people in the U.S. consume 1.35 drinks a day. Like that's kind of crazy. I know during COVID it was crazy. I feel like everyone I talk to, like, is it me, or are we all drinking a little bit more? Like, I think that's the case. I mean, maybe it's because people were stressed out, but also, unfortunately, you couldn't go out to the bars with your friends and stuff, and like you're not going to really get after it too hard if you have to drive home or something. So I'm assuming that's kind of slowed down a bit, or maybe not, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, you would think, right? But I think those habits, they don't die that quick. I mean, I think people got used to that kind of lifestyle again. And I mean, from our perspective, we see sales still climbing. People are still buying massive amounts of spirits in the United States. And, you look back to like Prohibition, when we're almost back to that level of purchasing, back to pre-Prohibition, before they tried to do the whole temperance movement and try to, back down the production and consumption of alcohol. But you would think it would be the opposite, but no, I think it's still growing.
I think maybe just again backing up a little bit and talking about maybe just kind of walking us through like the end-to-end process that actually before this turns into this actual product that I'm holding, like from the beginning, kind of maybe just talking through, like we shared some of those stats before on you get grain and walking through that. I'm just kind of curious.
We try to be as local as possible. So, we're trying to, we're a value add manufacturing business, essentially. We're buying from local ag to help ag in the local area in California. All of our grain comes, well, I'd say 95% of our grain comes from California. So you've got your farmers growing the corn, you've got the wheat, and those are not grown year round. These are items that are cyclical. So there's energy, there's water, there's the environment. We can't drive that. There's a lot of energy and pressure that goes on to the farmers. And to back up, we're fortunate to work with a few grain suppliers that contract out with local farmers. So we buy the grain from them. They harvest it, mill it, they process it, and we get it in bags because we're so small still. We're not bringing in trucks. but we bring it in a bagged form, already milled, and that lands into our distillery. And from there, we mash grain in, 100% grain, water, all right there. So we're filtering our water. We use city water, but then we carbon filter, sedimentary filter, UV. So we're treating that water before we go into a process. We're not just using straight city water. But then the amount of energy that goes into that. So you've got to, if you're working with a corn, it's a cereal grain. You're not working with a malt. When you're working for us, like making a single malt like this whiskey here, we're essentially steeping it to around 158, 160 degrees. The conversion is about a half hour, 45 minutes to get enzyme conversion. When we're making bourbon, we have to cook it. It's a cereal grain. It's not malted. So we have to take that up to 190 degrees, cook it, boil it, liquefaction at that level. And so it's a lot of energy to get up to that level, right? And then you've got to cool that back down, to then add your malts to have that enzymatic reaction to convert those starches that you broke down at that high temp level to sugars that are fermentable. And then you spend, a week of fermentation. You let the yeast get busy with the sugars in that grain, and it's about
do you play any like love music when they're getting busy? Do you play any love music in the background to encourage it?
I mean, we've always got music going during the day, but not for the grains for sure, and not
some Keith Sweat. You don't have Keith Sweat in the background. So
there's a few brands that play music to the barrels, and it's that reverb that goes through, and they're sold.
I could see that. Maybe that's just superstition, or does it really affect the flavor? You never know.
Sound waves, they travel, right? It's to be debated.
Okay. Yeah. So it goes through all that, then it gets cooled. Okay. And
so
then
we cool it, fermentation, then we go to distillation, right? So you take a ton of energy to now extract, because you made a beer, essentially. You made about a 5-10% beer, alcohol wise, and you've got to extract that alcohol. But that process is, your 2 days of distilling, you're an 8-hour run. You do that twice. So there's a lot of energy to get to that liquid. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to get to that liquid. And then now, you're sitting in a barrel, depending on where you're barreling it, where you raise it, you set it to rest for this one 6 years. Straight whiskeys are 2 years. So it's kind of the youngest you do. And you can go anywhere between there, wherever the flavors really, shine. And then you go to a bottle, right? So then now you're spending that time now shipping in your products. You got labels, paper labels, if you're not screen printing. That's another big part of, waste. And a lot of people are trying to go to screen print and avoid the labeling and paper.
Yeah, I think you said 20% is the bottling.
Yeah, so now we try to bring glass from as close as possible, but there's not a lot of glass plants in the U.S. anymore. That's kind of gone by the wayside. There are a few, but it's so much cheaper now to bring that in and import it from China or Mexico or Italy, and glass is coming from overseas. So that glass comes in. Same with corks. We get corks from Mexico, so we're not bringing them over the pond. Or it's all freight. It's going to be, train and rail. So there's that impact of transportation again, right? It's getting all those products, those ingredients to your bottling facility, wherever that may be. Right now, we feel like a bunch of guys kind of milking the cows and, filling bottles by hand.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, do you get your kids out there? Here, take a glue stick.
Yeah, I've got, my hands are turned into kind of meat paws, from corking and
definitely physical labor. Physical.